Hello world, what's good, Seattle? It's your girl Ebony at Black Dot Underground, the Toolkit Podcast. Tonight we have a VIP, a very important person. As usual, all of our guests are important. So tonight we have Mama Shay, Miss Shalisa, my personal shiro, powerful black woman, my cousin. But she's just been somebody I've been watching my whole life. And today we're going to talk about tragedy to a legacy. So I want to start off by saying thank you for coming and I know you're a busy woman.
Absolutely. But anything for you.
Thank you for making time to actually come on here and share some of your story. It's very powerful. And I think you have a lot to offer to our community, just in the things that you say. So I want to start off by first asking you, well, first I want to say I got my Team Billy Ray shirt on. So just to highlight that. But I want to ask you to tell us about Billy Ray.
Okay. So, well, first, let me say thank you for having me here. Although I don't reside in the CD anymore, I was born and raised here, so I'm happy to be home. Billy Ray is, as you know, my oldest son, and pictured on your shirt at the age of 17. And the backstory about him, and I'm going to highlight a little bit about him, but more so his dream. Back into early 2011, growing up, because he also was born here, and used to go to the Y down the street in the CD. And after living a few years in Tacoma, he was in the car with me one day, and as we're driving down the street, he just looks over at me and says, "Mom, how do you open a community center?" Now, again, he grew up in an area where if he wasn't in school and doing some other extracurricular activities, he was in a building that offered something that had his interest. Right. And so somehow he realized the lack of that in that type of facility in our area in Tacoma.
How old was he then?
At the time, he was actually just getting ready to turn 17. So he was being very observant. And so when he asked me, how do you open a community center? Now, as for my paid work, it pays my bills. I work for an insurance company. So I don't know anything. I don't know how to answer this child's question. But if you have a child or nieces and nephews, you know when a child asks you a question, you better have an answer.
Right.
So, and I've always taught him, I don't know is not good enough. So I could not actually say that to him. I had to come up with an answer. So I started coming up with what I knew of Garfield Community Center.
Right.
Okay, well, you can rent a gym and you can hire security and get some snacks. Like I really went back to when I was a kid and tried to give him some ideas. And then I stopped and said, well, wait, Billy Ray, why are you thinking about this? And he said, because there's nowhere for kids on the Eastside to go. And he's talking about the area that we lived in Tacoma. And I thought, he's onto something, being a little deep thinker. Okay. But he was absolutely right, because as a mother of two sons, 5 years apart, any activities I had them involved in, I had to take one to one building, drive across town, take one to another building, because there was no building right there in our area. Right. And we used to have a Boys and Girls Club out there, but it had closed down a couple years before that. So, he just noticed it. And he said, well, Mom, look around. These kids are playing out in the street, hanging out on the corner. And I was like, okay.
Old soul.
Right. So I gave him some more ideas, go on about life. Right. Well, 6 months later, Billy Ray and a couple of his friends were hanging out on the weekend, doing what teenagers do. He's 17 years old. They decide to go to an after hours party that a biker club was having, where one of his friends' mothers was at. And their idea was, we're going to go pick her up.
Right.
Now, from what I understand, she didn't ask for a ride. These are young boys trying to be mannish.
Right.
And trying to party at the same time, because they like she had the after hours. So they go to this after hours spot. The folks let them in, which they shouldn't have. These are underage kids. But nonetheless, they get in there. They find her. She's like, what are you doing here? Yeah. You can go home. And the boys decide, okay, well, she doesn't need a ride, but we're going to stick around for a minute.
Yeah.
So it's partying. I'm told that they were there all of about 10 minutes. Billy Ray bumps into somebody, and this person gets upset. A fight breaks out. when it's all said and done, my baby is shot, dead, and laying on the ground. So, a couple days after realizing my child would never walk through my front door again, something in my mind said community center. So I wrote about it in his obituary. I stood up at his funeral 1 week later and I said, he wanted a community center. We got to make it happen. And I walked off the stage. Now, once again, I worked in healthcare. I worked for a hospital and I worked for a health insurance company. I don't know how to make this happen, but it was my baby's dream. And for whatever reason, it felt like it needed to be said and done. So now when I reflect back, I say, well, that was probably my brain saying, if he had that community center, maybe he wouldn't have been at the after hours in a place where he shouldn't have been. And maybe he'd be alive today. So that's how I reflect back, because I never understood why that popped in my head. So in that audience was a group of young people who heard that message, believed in it, and 2 days after the funeral, they held a car wash. And they raised, for this community center, they raised a little over $700.
I remember that. So
they called me down. Oh, yeah, you were there. You were there for a lot. Oh, my goodness. We get down there. You saw it. We have this group of kids. They're all wearing my son's favorite color, red. They're waving their signs. And I got $700 in a group of kids in a dream. Yeah. And I couldn't turn back. I couldn't say, oh, you got to give this money back. Right. How are we going to track down the cars to give it back to begin with? Right. But I looked at these babies and I'm like, I got to make this happen. So from that is where Mama Shay was born, because I became their mom. They became my babies. And we started the Billy Ray Foundation. And I have to say that we had his funeral Friday. Car wash was Sunday. Monday was a holiday. Tuesday, me and those babies went to a meeting where there were some politicians and some important people in the audience and kind of crashed the party. Yeah. And we said, if a 17-year-old kid can recognize the need for this, then we as adults have to recognize the need and make something happen. Right. So we did that a lot. We crashed the party everywhere we heard somebody was going to be. And when it was all said and done, we were able to get 4 government entities to work together, which is who normally work in silos. Right. They worked together. We got some support. The Boys and Girls Club came back. And collectively, we worked really hard and raised $40 million, $32 million for the building, and then another $11.5 million, which were actually $1 million off. We still got more to raise. But we now have what opened last year, a 55,000 square foot community center called the Eastside Community Center.
State of the art,
which has, and I'm going to just, give some of the amenities. So for all of y'all who ain't never been, y'all need to show up so I can take you on a tour, see my baby spot. Yes, you the first one need to be there. There is a full size, what they call it, Olympic size pool. There is a gym, not just a workout room where people can work out. There's a full size gym. There is dance rooms, classrooms. There's a commercial size kitchen. There is what they call a social hall, so a place where you can have weddings and shows and things like that. And there is also my favorite, a recording studio.
I knew it.
And the recording studio is named after my baby, Billy Ray, because he loved music. And my youngest son graduated from the School of Arts, so they both were into music very heavily. Yes. So it's named after him. It's got that picture hung over the doorway, so everybody sees big old face sitting up there when they walk in. So we have middle schoolers, adults, high schoolers, everybody coming in here and receiving education around music. Yeah. So they're producing music, they're making beats, they're doing all sorts of stuff. It's amazing. They're making raps, they're rapping, they're making their own albums, and just getting exposure and access to things that they would have not had until college or after. So I get to see, kids in an area where if I remember correctly, it's 85% of the kids in that district are on free and reduced lunch.
85%?
Yes.
Wow.
So that gives you an indication of the type of neighborhood we're in. It's very diverse, and
Right.
it's actually the poorest in the city.
Right.
So these are kids that wouldn't have access to
Right.
that sort of thing.
Right.
And actually, a lot of affluent neighborhoods don't have that access that early.
Correct.
I've had some folks come in that I know have they have the funds to have that kind of stuff, but their kids are just now getting access to it in college. And so they're standing around going, this is a good idea.
Right.
Like,
Right.
So Billy Ray's dream has come to life, and young people who we call Team Billy Ray, those same kids that raised that money, were pivotal in making that happen. They came with me lobbying legislatures and talking with different private funders and getting donations to make that $40 million happen.
Yes.
So those are my babies, and they made history. And we walk in that building and see hundreds of kids in there every day, and their families. But my focus is the kids.
The kids, right? And so I remember. There's a Billy Ray Shirley Day, right, Tacoma?
Yes. So a year or two after his death, the mayor declared his day, the day he died, as Billy Ray Day.
Yes.
And it highlighted his dream, some things he had done in terms of community service as a kid, and Team Billy Ray, the work that they were doing. So there's that. There's lots of things that we've done or others have done to recognize him. Because as his teacher said, the day he died, he is not another statistic.
Right.
And we want to highlight the dreams and the efforts. And so there's Billy Ray Day, and what's going to happen this year, because I've already seen it, and it's really happening. But they're actually building a life-size statue of him. Yes. And it's not. I always have to remind people, I know you family, that's our baby that's up there. But at the end of the day, that is going to be there to inspire young people. Yes. To say, dream big, and if you work hard at those dreams, there will be people that'll come and help you and make it happen. Yes. And so that's my goal, is to Billy Ray's not here to make the center happen that he wanted to make happen, but those young people are and did, and you can do other things that you dream of too. So yes,
his vision. So that's a lot, and I know that was like day and night work, long days, early mornings, and late nights, right? And so at the end of the day, when you're burnt out and you're out of fuel, what keeps you thriving? What motivates you?
The babies. I say that all the time because no matter what, I jumped in this literally right after his funeral, and the things that kept me going through that process was I had young people to answer to.
I remember there was kids in the living room just
movie
night.
Yes.
They wouldn't leave. They'll come and check on you, make sure you eat.
Yes.
I remember they wasn't going nowhere. You good? Go to the store, whatever you needed.
Mama, I'm coming to dump the garbage. You have what you need. Like, those babies kept me going, and they continue to, because I know that center is for them.
Right.
Because the goal is they have a place to be, whether it's them, their kids, their siblings. These young people have an alternative. Right. And that's what I look at this community center to be. It's not the end all be all. It's not the answer to violence, but it is an alternative.
Right.
And so those kids that are hanging out on the corners and that, getting, into trouble, or being, just being an observer of it, they now have some place to be. Right. And it's safe and it's healthy and it gives them, it's interesting, the things that they can learn and do in that building. So I look at those kids and I'm like, I couldn't tell them no. Like, I didn't tell myself no. Like, when they gave me that $700, how could I tell them no?
Right, right.
And even being realistic, like, it was like, okay, like at some point I had to tell them, listen, I don't care how many car washes you have. We're not going to get $30 million with $700 of the car washes. So, being very honest with them, but still saying, like, you got to get up and try. You got to get up and try. And how can I hold them to a standard that I wasn't holding myself to? Right. So we always tell kids, dream big and do this and work hard. And who would I have been if I had said, do this, and then said, oh, I quit? Right. Right. So I look at them and I say, they make me happy. They support me. And I owe them this because I'm a generation before them. And I'm supposed to make this world a safe one for them. Yes. So I owe them this. Yes. And then when they see me work hard, then they will do the same for the next generation.
Right.
So it's the babies.
Yes, it's all about the kids. So tell us about some of your international experience, like Switzerland.
Yes. So this work in itself garnered a lot of attention because, one, there were folks who just wondered, just like you said, what keeps you going? How do you get up every day? And now you in the face of a legislature or the face of somebody asking, can you write me a $1 million check? And, so somehow someone wrote about me in a newsletter.
Right.
And someone in Switzerland saw that newsletter, read it, and said, we got to get her here. And we got to get her here to a conference because we want to not only hear her story, but learn from her. Because violence happens everywhere in the world. Just different areas the violence is, the reason for behind the violence is different.
It's a universal language.
Exactly. So how do we turn a negative into a positive? Because it was very easy for me to go and retaliate and try to find who killed my child, and I'm going to get you, I'm going to get your family, and that sort of stuff. But what message am I sending to Billy Ray's friends?
Right.
Or his younger brother, my child?
Right.
I had to jump up for my child. This is, in the face of adversity, you have to be different. And if you're going to be strong, because everybody can't be strong, but at least you have to be able to, just keep going and follow whatever your plan is.
Right.
So anyway, I went to Switzerland and a couple times, actually. I've been twice. And I've been able to share this story and give tips because people want to know, how did you raise the money? How did you get other people to get away from that negative kind of thoughts, that space in their head, and actually work to do something positive? So I shared that kind of stuff with them.
What kind of crowds was it?
Oh, I got to speak in front of, it was about, I think, 300 or 400 people in the room. So these are all representatives from 150 different countries.
Ooh.
And they translated my speech live in 5 different languages.
That's powerful.
So Billy Ray's story is worldwide at this point. And people know that pose that's on that shirt. And people there's some even now, they're on my Facebook. There's some, and they might have to hit the translate button to see what I'm talking about. But they're there and they still follow and support, and I love it. So
that's a big deal. That's a big deal. That's definitely a tragedy into a legacy, because that's touching people worldwide. Because again, violence is universal. Mm-hmm. But to see that go so far, and I believe it was touching people around the world early on. Yeah, when he first passed and stuff like that. Because I remember you was on the TBN and Trinity Broadcast Network. And you was on a few different places, and I know that story touched so many people so fast. Yeah. And so to see where it's at now, and then the growth of it, this is amazing. This is why you're my shiro. So my question to you is, so first, what was you doing before this?
So, and I still do it. So for the last 21 years, I worked for a health insurance company.
So I managed a staff in 4 different states.
So I managed a
staff. At the time that he died, I was
also working at a hospital in a hospice unit. So doing administrative stuff. So I got to see the treatment and then decide that pays for it. So healthcare has always been my thing. And then
totally opposite from a community center.
Yeah. But coming from the CD and, having a single mom because my father was murdered and that sort of stuff. I also mentored young people. Right. But my son's death put me on a bigger platform. Right. So my side thing was always, how do I give back to my community? And it was always talking to young people and saying, I came from this neighborhood, so I know what you're going through, and you can do things to come up out of it. You don't have to be a product of your environment. Right. So it was natural for me to, when those young people stood up, it was natural for me to embrace them because I already loved young people outside of my own, and wanted to help them do something with life. Right. That's dope. So who inspires you? I think I take a bit of pieces from everybody. It's definitely, like I said, it's the kids that keep me motivated. I look at other mothers, I look at other folks that are being activists, and anybody who's contributing to this world, particularly my neighborhood, my people, and doing something positive. And I take a piece from them, whether it's just to learn on my own journey or just to be like, that's dope. And that should, continue to motivate me as well.
Yes.
So no one individual.
Right. That's what's up. So speaking of moms, mothers, tell us about MOM, which is an acronym.
Yes. MOM is Mothers of Magnitude. And it started off as a dinner that we were hosting. We, Team Billy Ray, were hosting for mothers of deceased children. We found out the true meaning. I had a mentor of mine tell me the true meaning of Mother's Day. So if you don't know it, check it out, how it started. And I took it back to Team Billy Ray, and because we were doing a lot of community service, and said, let's do something for mothers like me.
Right.
And so we hosted this big show. We got talent. We fed them. And it's a whole cool little thing. But then that turned into a bigger thing, because along the way, I also had mothers of deceased children who would contact me and they wanted to learn from me.
Right.
Or I was doing some form of grief coaching, because as I'm going through my own journey in grief, I'm learning and now I'm passing that on to other mothers. So it turned from a dinner to that's also kind of my label for my coaching that I do with moms.
That's dope.
And trying to get them from A to B from their grief.
That's dope. So you do so much. We got a celebrity in the building, y'all. Just FYI, so y'all know. So with all that being said, I want to ask a few specific questions about grief. So what advice would you give to someone who doesn't know how to grieve or don't know that they don't even know how to grieve?
First is, in some ways, you have to be selfish. For me, it's all about self-care.
Yeah.
And I do not allow anything to intrude or impede on my self-care. So what that self-care looks like is totally up to me. It could be a day at the spa. It could be I'm going in my room. Right. I'm shutting the door. I'm not answering the phone. And those who are trying to call, you're going to have to understand that and respect that. And so that's the first thing is I would say, take care of self. Do what makes you happy. Stay away from the triggers.
Right.
And most importantly, it's okay.
Yeah.
Like, it's okay. I tell people all the time, in the years that I've been through this, I could get up right now, fall on this floor and be a hot mess of tears.
Right.
And all I tell people, just leave me be.
Right.
Because them tears will stop at some point. I'll pick myself up together. I'll get up and walk on, and it'll be okay.
Right.
So be okay with dropping those tears and saying, I'm having a moment.
Right.
And there's no, I'm embarrassed. There's no, what are they going to think? I don't care what you think, because I buried my child.
Right.
And that's different from you burying your cousin or your mom or your dad. This is a whole different thing. I created this human being and brought him into the world. So my grief is very different.
Right.
And respect that boundary.
Right.
The other things I always say is, one is you're normal. Everything that you're going through is normal, because you might feel crazy, but it's normal.
Right.
The other thing, especially for those of us where we've lost a child by the hands of someone else, it's not your fault.
Right.
People come up with, well, what if I would have called them that day? What if I would have picked them up? What if I would have? No, that does not guarantee that the outcome was going to be different.
Right. Right.
And if it didn't happen, that outcome didn't happen that day, it could have happened another day.
Right.
So you can drive yourself crazy with the what ifs, or accept that it's not your fault.
Because I know, for me, coming from the CD too, I know grief and along with a bunch of other emotions, sometimes it's hard to deal with them when you're in the face of surviving, or you've been raised to be this kind of way or not to show this kind of way, especially for young Black men who are, not supposed to have emotions and all these different kind of things. So I know it's something in our community that is it's necessary to learn how to do. But it's kind of looked over, because I know for me, even when I was grieving, I didn't even realize that I didn't know that I was grieving until it actually caught up with me, because I was so busy checking on my family. Are you okay? Just being the runner and the strong person for everybody, especially when we lost my nephew. I was making sure everybody was okay. And then that went on for a while until it just caught up with me, and I just had to break down.
Yeah.
And so not knowing that you don't even know how to grieve, that's big, but it's common in our community, unfortunately.
I think it's common because we have not been able to identify, or we haven't been educated on identifying what grief looks like, but also what to do about it.
Right.
So as Black people, a lot of us have been raised in households of, we'll deal with it at home.
Right.
Like, let me tell you, it's okay to go talk to a therapist.
Right.
Please.
Right.
Go talk to a therapist. And then you start to learn yourself. Like,
Right.
I remember, because I'm a late nighter, I'm always up in the middle of the night. But I remember sitting, like, my boss came to the office one day and looked at me and was like, do you want to go home? Like, I look sleepy, apparently, to her. And I thought about it. I was like, yeah, I do. So I went home and I called my friend and we kind of chuckled about it. And then she said, well, Shay, when's the last time you've been asleep? And this was like Monday. And I thought about it and I was like, Friday? And she was like, okay, yeah, that's not normal. Like, you need to go to sleep.
Right.
And I realized that's depression and anxiety. I thought it was okay because I'm accustomed to being up late.
Right.
Even before my son was dead. I thought it was just my normal thing.
Right.
Like, oh, okay, I'm not really getting no sleep. It's okay. I might get 15 minutes here, 15 minutes there.
Right.
No, that's your anxiety and depression. Like,
Right.
and even though, and I couldn't identify it because it wasn't like I was sitting up in my bed at night thinking about my son. Like, I wasn't sitting there like, oh my God, woe is me, my son is dead. Like, it wasn't happening. So I didn't identify it. It was just, I just wasn't sleeping.
Yeah.
And so I was just like, okay. So things like that. And that's where, the education around this, first of all, this is mental health.
Right.
And things that factor into your mental health can be these things like depression, anxiety, and all this other stuff, and bipolar and all those other things that people go through. So one, just being able to identify the signs and then going and doing something about it. So luckily for me, because I work in healthcare, I went and did something about it, where somebody else might have not, because, we're just gonna deal with this at home.
Right.
No, I'm crazy. Let me go. Let me go talk to my doctor about this.
Right. So what advice would you give someone who's dealing with someone that don't know how to grieve, or needs a little, like, how, if I'm dealing with a relative or somebody I know needs to grieve or is fighting to grieve or whatever, what advice would you give for support or whatever the case may be?
The main thing is patience. Because while I'm still my happy bubbly self, I'm still not very much the same. So have patience with me and know that whatever I choose to do is nothing personal against you. So like that whole, I'm not answering the phone or I'm not coming to your birthday party. Well, there's things that's tied to that.
Right.
I'm not coming to your birthday party because I'm upset that I don't get to go to my own son's birthday party because he's dead.
Right.
And that's not anything personal with you. It's just I can't sit in that moment and help celebrate that because I'm still dealing with my own.
Right.
So one, have patience and understand that it's not personal. Second is definitely be there to support, and don't say, I know how you feel, because unless you've been in those shoes, you don't know how they feel. Be that ear. When they call you at 2, 3 in the morning, answer the phone, let them scream, holler, and do whatever, and then check on them. I always say to people, the real work starts after the funeral ends.
Yes.
Because throughout the process of the planning the funeral, everybody's at your house.
Right.
Everybody's bringing you food. How are you? They cleaning your house. They're doing everything necessary to help you float along. Then everybody goes to the funeral, and when it's done, everybody goes back home and goes back to their own lives.
Right.
Now, that's not anything negative against them. They have to. They got jobs. They got children. They got things of their own. But remember, I'm still over here. I'm still grieving. My baby's still dead.
Right.
So check on me for every now and then.
Right.
And if I say I don't want to be bothered today, don't take it personal.
Right.
Just call me back on another day. I might be better the other day. So, so just those two things. I think be patient and don't, remove yourself from their lives because they get scared. People, oh gosh, she's talking about Billy Ray. Is she going to start crying?
Right.
Let me cry.
Right.
I got 17 years of history that is never going to go away. Memories that I'm going to still share. I talk about him like he's still here.
Yes.
And if that makes you uncomfortable, you need to check yourself.
Right.
Because if he was still here, you would enjoy this conversation.
Yeah.
But just because he's dead, now I'm supposed to be quiet and not share about him? No, I'm going to tell you about, remember that time Billy Ray did this such and such? Had me chasing him down the street with my no shoes on because he was acting the fool? Like, I need to be able to share that.
Yes. Yes.
So, so those are the top things that come to my mind.
There you have it, y'all. From the woman herself. So in closing, I want to talk about how to reach you. But before that, just give us a list of the things that you do. So when a person does reach you, they know what options that you have.
So I would say definitely ShalisaHayes.com. That's the easiest way because you're going to find a phone number, email, everything is there. And you'll also see more about me. So there's the grief coaching. So I do sit with moms that are grieving and try and coach them. I also sell now. I wrote a grief journal to help them through that process. I'm a consultant. So people are always asking, how did you raise that money? What did you do? So I've given those tips. What else am I doing?
Mentoring.
Yes, youth mentor. So I'm quite involved in violence prevention work. So that's what's next for next year for me is I'm going to be running a youth program in the community center and teaching kids about violence prevention. And then of course the motivational speaking or speaking in general, just whether it's to share my story or whether, for people to learn from me or just inspiring other people.
That is so dope. So there you have it, you guys. You can just go to ShalisaHayes.com and that's spelled
SHA and Lisa, LISA, Hayes, HAYES.com.
Yes. Thank you so much for your time.
You're very welcome.
Before we go, last question I want to ask, what's in your toolkit?
What's in my toolkit?
Yes.
People.
That's dope.
Yes.
That's
people.
dope.
I have a resource for everything.
Yes. And that's important.
Those are people.
So you got her her website. So she got the resources in her toolkit, all the people. So that's dope.
That's it.
So
I call them whether it's for myself or somebody else. I got a person for it.
Yes, thank you so much. So this is Team Billy Ray. This is that's the smile. That's his smile right here. Thanks for
one thing he got of me.
Yes. Thanks for tuning in, and until we see you next time, thanks for watching.